Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to another episode of What's Up Doc. I'm your host, Dr. Aalia Al-Barwani, and I'm a board-certified family physician. My show, What's Up Doc, is a production of Muslim Network TV, the only Muslim-focused network broadcasting in North America. You can watch all of our shows streaming 24/7 on Amazon TV, Fire TV, Roku TV, and Galaxy 19. You can also watch us online at our website, muslimnetwork.tv, and on our YouTube page at youtube.com/Muslim Network TV. Today we have another exciting episode, and we're going to be talking about obesity. Here in the United States, the rate of obesity stands at about 42%, and that's only expected to increase in the coming years. Joining us in that discussion is Dr. Shirisha Avadhanula. Dr. Avadhanula currently serves as an endocrinologist and clinical assistant professor of medicine in Cleveland, Ohio. She is a frequent medical contributor and has appeared on several media outlets. She completed her fellowship training at MedStar Georgetown University Hospital and MedStar Washington Hospital Center. She earned an additional academic and research fellowship in endocrinology in a joint program between the National Institutes of Health and MedStar Washington Hospital Center, focusing primarily on novel approaches to the diagnosis and treatment of thyroid disorders. She continues to be involved in ongoing clinical research at the National Institutes of Health. Dr. Avadhanula provides special expertise throughout various aspects of endocrinology, including disorders of the thyroid, transgender care, obesity medicine, and has a special interest in women's health. She utilizes a multidisciplinary collaborative approach to ensure the delivery of the best quality patient care. Dr. Avadhanula uses her background in clinical care research and media experience to focus on increasing public awareness of a broad range of medical and scientific topics. Welcome, Dr. Avadhanula. I'm sorry. I think I stumbled in the beginning there with your name, but it's such a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
You have quite an impressive background in this topic and in topics within your field of endocrinology that it's very exciting to be able to talk with you today about obesity. As I mentioned in the beginning in the introduction today, obesity is something that affects a good number of Americans, but also people worldwide. And I mentioned the statistic for adults, but of course it's also affecting children. Our focus today will be on adults. And I guess to start things off, let's talk about some of the terms that we use in diagnosing or in treating people with obesity. And that is the word obesity itself. A lot of my patients take it to be a derogatory term, and they don't think of it as something that is a medical diagnosis and actually a condition that is diagnosed just like heart disease or diabetes or anything else in medicine. So let's start by defining what that is and then go from there.
Yeah, so thanks again for having me. I'm really happy to be here. You know, when we talk about obesity, we're talking really about a scientific definition, which is based on a body mass index, also known as a BMI. This is something that you can calculate at home. You just need your height and your weight. And really, it's based on your body mass index number. So just as an example, if your body mass index number is 30, then you are in the category of obesity. I do want to mention, though, this term is not necessarily generalizable. Like a lot of things in medicine, we're learning and we're adjusting to different populations. So just as an example, we now have different terminology and body mass index cutoffs for Asians and Asian Americans. So this body mass index cutoff is not necessarily generalizable, and that's something that it's important to keep in mind. So when we talk about obesity, yes, we're looking at a clinical scientific definition based on your BMI. But I do, to your point, I agree with you. Obesity can be hard to hear. It can be, it can be a heavy term to listen to. So I do want to make it clear that I don't want to focus so much on numbers, rather what the potential of gaining weight can imply in terms of things like conditions that are related to obesity and being overweight.
It's a great point that you make, because as you said, it's really not obesity itself. I mean, well, obesity itself has a lot of factors, both metabolic and hormonal, that affect a person, but it's really the effects of that obesity on a person's health that we're treating. It's kind of like looking at the person as a whole. So that's an excellent point that you make. Now, I specify that obesity is a diagnosis and a medical condition because a lot of the times people think it's just a descriptive term. So thank you for explaining that actually, it's a calculation. And as you specified as well, that things are changing. We used to have just a broad category for all people within a certain BMI was considered obese, but then we're now finding in other subpopulations, as in Asians and Asian Americans, that is different, that number at cutoff is varied. So it's quite interesting, as you mentioned, that as we find out more about medicine, things are changing. And so when it comes to the impact of of obesity, I think I'm jumping the gun there with some of the impact of obesity on our health. Let's talk about some ways in which obesity can affect our health and why it's important to even diagnose it in the first place.
When we talk about obesity, the thing that we most worry about really is obesity-related conditions, right? And when we talk about obesity-related conditions, we're talking about things like diabetes, as you correctly alluded to. We're talking about things like strokes and things that ultimately lead to a heart attack. So these are cardiovascular risk factors that we really need to very, very carefully control. And so, I certainly agree with you. Rather than kind of a cold scientific label, we really need to think about obesity as a broad kind of holistic view that ultimately increase your risk of developing cardiovascular risk factors and increase your rates of heart attacks. And that's really what we're trying to do when we're trying to help people lose weight.
Absolutely. That's very important to understand. Now, I mentioned a statistic again in my introduction, but how common, as an endocrinologist, I'm sure you have patients coming to you with obesity. And so how common is the incidence, or how common is obesity here in the United States? And maybe if you have other numbers as well.
Obesity is common. It's more common than you think. On a personal level, it's my most common consult. So, patients will come to me for things like medical weight management, and we'll treat them accordingly. But obesity in the United States, as you correctly said in the beginning, during the introduction, it's around 40% in the United States, and that's a huge number. And that is something that we can target, and is something that we hope to see come down in the future. Unfortunately, the trends of obesity, they're going up, and obesity is a rather newer problem. I would say about 30 years ago, 40 years ago, the main nutritional focus was really focused on starvation. But now we have shifted, and after 1995, we've really recognized obesity as a pandemic. And so we're seeing that obesity is currently on the rise. And although food insecurity really remains a major problem, both here at home and certainly abroad, obesity has really become the main focus, and the numbers are only going up.
Very interesting. In your, I guess, just experience, or maybe thinking about obesity and the trends that you just described, what would you say are some factors that are contributing to that increase? I know from my standpoint in seeing patients in practice, and that's children and adults, I am seeing that as well. And this past year, that has been attributed to the pandemic. People are not moving, they're not as active, especially in the beginning when we really were unsure of how to navigate this pandemic. People were just literally in lockdown in their homes. They were not moving. There was a lot of stress going on around that time. So people were eating for comfort, or perhaps because of the stress. And so I was seeing these trends when we finally kind of opened back up and patients were coming back into the office. I started noticing people's weight and children's weights were going up, and they would give me these as reasons for why they gained weight. What are some of the things that you're seeing or speculate as to globally or nationally, how we're seeing this trend play out?
Yeah, and I think that's such a good point that you brought up, because I also, in my practice, I've seen a lot of patients who we treat for weight management. They've sort of backslid a little bit on their weight loss journeys. And unfortunately, it's a consequence of the environment. During the pandemic, it was a really difficult time to lose weight. A lot of us were working from home. I know I could speak for myself. I was doing a lot of telehealth, and it was very dangerous for somebody that wanted to lose weight, because during the daytime, in between appointments, or in between your meetings or whatever it is that you're doing over telehealth or telemedicine, not telemedicine, over telecommunication, excuse me, you can graze at things that are in your kitchen. So you may keep things that are in your cupboards that you may know that are not the best for you, like cookies and chips and things like that. It's easier for you to reach for them when you're at home and when you're working at home. There's other things like, for example, when we get up and go to work, just that calorie expenditure of getting up in the morning, walking to your car, walking to the elevator, walking to your office, all of those, cumulative calorie expenditure that you had previously are now removed. So a lot of it, as you correctly alluded to, is really a result of the environment. But also, it's important. One of the things that you kind of mentioned, globally, that's important to note is that, globally, we have this huge expansion of things like fast food restaurants and places that did not, have these options before. So it's a within the environment. It's not necessarily just a place that you put yourself in, but it's also a consequence of what is placed around you in the environment. The restaurants and the food choices that are available to you in your close proximity, not only in the United States, but also globally, may not necessarily be the best food choices. So we're seeing a lot of environmental impacts now in obesity. That could potentially be the reason why, or one of the reasons I should say, why the trends in obesity are going up.
I have to agree with you. I personally see this when I go into a store. I mean, to buy some Coke or soda is cheaper than buying a bottle of water.
Exactly.
It doesn't make it, like you said, the environment is so important, and it's not necessarily always environments that you can control, because you can't control it, well, to an extent, what a store stocks, and what the prices that they set, because it is cheaper probably to produce things that are unfortunately not so good for our health. And so those are the things that are more affordable. And of course, we see in patients who have come from a lower socioeconomic status that they are prey to these tactics, because that's what they can afford. And so there's when I talk to my patients, I struggle with that, because I'm trying to encourage healthy eating, but for them, who they may live in a food desert where they don't have easy access to a supermarket or a proper grocery store, they have to rely on the local store to stock things. And a lot of the times it's processed stuff that's going to keep on the shelves and not fresh foods. And so a lot of that does contribute. I completely agree with you. Quick story. I walked into a store the other day, and I've never seen this before. And I saw a 5-liter bottle of Coke. It was huge. It was huge. I've never seen a bottle of Coke that big. I needed both hands, and I still couldn't wrap my hands around it. And I was just thinking, who needs a 5-liter bottle of Coke? It just blew my mind. And I don't know if this is anywhere outside of the United States, or if this is an American thing, but I was quite surprised to see that.
That's not a bottle. That's a tank.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a tank of Coke.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. To your point, most of my patient population, I serve the underserved here in Cleveland. So I perfectly understand when you talk about food deserts, where patients will live a certain mile radius away from their local produce or fresh food store. And that is absolutely something that I certainly struggle with in my practice. And I know many practitioners such as yourself struggle with the same thing. So I definitely agree with you on that one.
Yes. So we're going to have to take a quick break here. When we come back, we'll keep talking about this and some things and some ways to help people in our audience with this topic. So we'll be back in just a few minutes.
A free online chat can give you the personalized tips you need to start boosting your retirement savings today.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
We are Justice for All. Headquartered in the heart of downtown Chicago, Justice for All is a global humanitarian initiative dedicated to raising awareness for human rights concerns impacting vulnerable minority groups. Our diverse team of staff and volunteers, led by Imam Malik Mujahid, work tirelessly to help Justice for All achieve their goals. We promote policies that protect religious freedom, address the root causes of mass displacement, and recognize the plight of refugees and forced migrants. Together, we can continue to stand up for justice. Justice for all.
Find out how to use an awkward silence to help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to What's Up Doc. I'm your host, Dr. Aalia Al-Barwani, and today we're joined by Dr. Avadhanula, and we are talking about an important topic, which is obesity. And so before the break, Dr. Avadhanula, we were talking about some of the things that we were kind of going back and forth about, some speculations on what may be causing this increasing trend in obesity as we described in the beginning of the show. So now that we kind of have a good idea and understand that it's multifactorial, essentially, we can't narrow it down to one particular thing. So let's talk a little bit about some causes behind obesity. As far as not the trend itself, but that contribute to someone having obesity. And what in your experience have you seen? I mentioned earlier that there is a hormonal metabolic component, but let's get into a little bit of detail for our audience so that they get a better understanding.
Yeah, so you know what I can do actually is, let me take a step back a little bit. I'll walk you through what happens when somebody comes and sees me for a weight loss consult. So, the first thing that we always do when a patient comes to our office and they're trying to seek medical care for weight loss is we take a look at their medication list. So we've identified that there are certain medications that could potentially cause weight gain. We're talking about certain antidepressant medications. If somebody has been on steroids, for example, all of these medications can contribute to secondary weight gain. And these types of medications are things that we like to try to minimize. And I am certainly not saying that if you are on these medications, you should stop them. Absolutely not. But these are factors that we take into consideration when we're thinking about, why is it perhaps more difficult or more challenging for this patient to lose weight? That's the first thing that we look at. The second thing that we look at that you kind of alluded to earlier is, potentially, is there something going on hormonally speaking that may be causing or maybe making it more challenging for this patient to lose weight? So I'll give you an example. Hypothyroidism, just as an example, when somebody has a lower functioning thyroid, their metabolism will slow and it'll make it more challenging for a patient to lose weight. Alternatively, and more rarely, there's things like cortisol overproduction, Cushing's disease, Cushing's syndrome, that may cause challenges for losing weight. This is certainly a more complex condition, and certainly, see your provider if you think you may have symptoms of Cushing's, which are very broad and numerous. But just to give you kind of hormonal examples of why it may be difficult or more challenging for you to lose weight, other things like polycystic ovarian syndrome for women that have PCOS, it may make it more challenging for them to lose weight. So we really look and we try to do a thorough workup of why potentially it may be more challenging for you to lose weight. So once we've kind of moved past any potential organic cause of difficulty losing weight, that's when we start, to look at things like what's happening in your environment. Are there any potential behavioral modifications that we could make? There's certain mental health conditions that we encourage patients to see therapists for. For example, food addiction is certainly a real problem, and we have our patients seek a therapist for that. So that's when we start looking at kind of behavioral patterns. We look at environmental patterns, and then go through a thorough workup before we start any kind of treatment, whether it's behavioral or whether it's medical or whether it's surgical for weight management.
Excellent. Thank you for walking us through that and taking that step back, because that's really important for people to understand that it's not just a one size fits all. It's really an evaluation and looking at multiple things and in different factors that, like you said, medication, possible metabolic issues. And it's funny that you mentioned thyroid as your example. I mean, obviously that's something that you are really interested in for your field, but it's one of the most common things as a primary care provider that I have people coming in asking me to check them for when they are noticing either unexplained weight gain or trouble with weight loss. That's one of the first things people are saying, hey, could it be my thyroid? Could you please check that for me? So I love that that was one of your examples. The other was PCOS, and just a small little plug here for our show. We did do an episode on PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, with Dr. Vijaytha. So if you haven't watched that, please check out our video on that. So with all that being said, one of the most common misconceptions about the causes to obesity is that people who have obesity or overweight even, just have no self-control, and that they just need to push back from the table. That is something that I've heard a lot and have been guilty of promoting by telling patients that, hey, just eat less, it's calories in, calories out, before I myself became more educated in obesity medicine and got certified, etc. So this is something that even in the medical field, medical professionals are probably promoting, and then patients are left thinking that this is they're to blame, perhaps, because if only they just didn't eat as much, then they would not have obesity or overweight. So along those lines, you just explained beautifully how that's really not the case, because there's a lot of things that go into how a person becomes obese or overweight, comes to have that. Now, what are some other misconceptions that you see in your practice that you're having to either break down or explain to patients and debunk?
Yeah, and I think that you really very eloquently brought up that point, because I think that blaming a patient for their weight gain or for their challenges in weight loss is the most dangerous misconception that you can ever have in a medical practice, because certainly there are times where patients have medical conditions that just make it much more challenging for them to lose weight rather than the general population. And I think also there's kind of this common misconception out there, just as you alluded to, that people say, well, if it's so easy, why not just lose the weight? If for all of its costs and gains, and why not just lose the weight? It's not that simple. That's the truth, right? And the reason that it's not so simple is multifactorial, and it really has to do, part of it has to do with our genetics, and part of it has to do with evolution as well. So we, as you know, we all know that for anyone that's ever tried to lose just 1 pound, it's very difficult, and there's a reason for that. So when you try to lose weight, your body, through its hormonal drive and evolutionary tendencies, makes it very difficult for you to lose weight. So for example, if I started reducing 500 calories just out of my diet, as an example, tomorrow, my body will secrete counter-regulatory hormones to make me hungrier and to avoid that weight loss. It's going to want to try to have me eat more and gain that weight back, because it thinks it's in a period of starvation. So we have a hormonal aspect to it, but the other part of it is that when you start exercising and when you start losing weight, after a little while, your body becomes more efficient at conserving energy. So for example, if you were on a treadmill for, say, 30 minutes, and you burn 120 calories doing a 30-minute run on a treadmill, if you lost weight, your body will become more efficient at conserving energy. And basically what that means is that that exact same run, instead of you burning, say, 120 calories, you'll only burn 100 calories. And so, as you can see, there's hormonal and evolutionary reasons why it's really, really difficult for you to lose weight. The other part of this is that, like I mentioned, there's certain mental health issues that patients will have, where they tend to go to food because it's very emotional, and part of this is part of food addiction, and we certainly try in our multidisciplinary approach to try to have patients see mental health providers, and that's certainly another aspect of it. But there's real genetic and evolutionary reasons why it's so hard to lose weight. So it's not easy.
Thank you for underlining and sharing that, because I completely agree with you. Even as I said, I've since my embarrassing my admission of just telling patients, hey, just let's cut back on your calories and see what happens. Have learned that really, as you said, it goes back to even how, what kind of birth you had, and whether you were breastfed, and how your mom ate when she was pregnant with you. It really does run deep. So it's really important that if you are someone who's suffering with overweight or obesity, that you are not just blaming, first of all, definitely don't blame yourself. And secondly, seek help from a licensed professional who's maybe even taken either certification or specializes in obesity medicine, because as I just admitted, as a family provider, until I myself became certified, I did not have a good understanding of how to really help patients lose weight. It's something that we know to say, and we encourage our patients really with a lot of medical diseases, as you mentioned in the beginning, high blood pressure, diabetes, osteoarthritis, even knee pain, things like that. We tell our patients to lose some weight, but then we just kind of leave it at that. And so I think we'll talk about that towards the end of the episode, as far as how we can offer help to our patients. But before we jump into that, let's take several steps back and start to talk about some treatment options. for obesity. What are some things that we can do to help our patients who are struggling with obesity and overweight?
Yeah, so, just to be clear, I do want to say that you're not wrong. You're certainly not wrong to say that we think about calorie intake and expenditure. But I think what we've done in, the last 10 or 20 years that obesity medicine has expanded and evolved, I should say, is that we've really begun to dive deeper into what that really means. So when we talk about calorie intake, yes, we're talking about what you're eating, but we have to take into account things like the quality of the food that you're consuming. We also have to take into account things like intentional eating. Why are you eating what you're eating, right? I always tell my patients that every time you put something in your mouth, you have to think about why. Why are you doing this? So it's not so simple, but the other part of it is the calorie expenditure, and calorie expenditure is even more complex. So when we think about calorie expenditure, we're not just talking about how many times or how many steps are you taking in a day? How many times are you exercising in a day? But this is a place where things like metabolism comes in, things like genetics, epigenetics, as you correctly alluded to, plays a huge part. So with that kind of background in mind, and just the basic sort of principle is weight loss occurs when there's a net negative of calorie intake and expenditure, but it's certainly not that simple. There's very complex, when we talk about these things. But just with that, so with that scope, kind of moving forward, how we approach patients, just as you correctly mentioned before, in medicine now we have more of an individualized approach, which is of course, fantastic in a medical perspective, because this is not a one size fits all. Every body is different and everybody is different. So we take an individualized approach. So when a patient comes to us and they're trying to seek out medical ways to lose weight, at the very first is we do a thorough workup, make sure that there's no secondary causes of obesity or secondary causes why they're not able to lose the weight. And then when we have ruled out all of those possible organic things, we move on to lifestyle modifications. And so we always educate the patients on what food choices may be best for them. We let our patients know that just as a ballpark number, if you lose around 500 calories in your day, you'll lose approximately 1 pound of fat. That's kind of the general sort of principle. So 500 calorie net negative calorie debt, I should say, will help you lose 1 pound a week. So if you're eating 2,500 calories in the day, if you reduce that to around 2,000, then yeah, there's a good possibility that at the end of the week you'll lose a pound. So I think that's a good kind of ballpark number. Now, I certainly want to say that again, it's not like a completely precise number. I don't want you to think that yes, that is 1,000 calories, definitely 2 pounds, and really like you focus on these numbers. It's just these are kind of ballpark things. So just keep that in mind. The other thing with the intentional eating piece is that I always ask patients to start writing down every single thing that they're eating, because it allows them to really think about what they're eating, why they're eating what they're eating, and the quality of the food that they're consuming. So those are kind of the behavioral and nutritional aspects of it. We also ask them to exercise. The general recommendation is 5 days a week, 30 minutes. And then we go into kind of the medical part of it.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm very curious when you ask your patients, because I also ask my patients to write down what they're eating so we can kind of go into it, especially because I've noticed a lot of patients, like you just said, don't really know what is healthy, because we have so many gimmicky ads promoting things that are not healthy to be healthy. And so having that list, we kind of go through it together for that reason as well. And so I'm just curious, how successful are you with getting your patients to actually write things down? I mean, there are apps that make it easy, and I try to even promote those apps, but I have a hard time. But so I'm wondering, as you see this more regularly, how successful are you in getting them to write this down?
So in the beginning, I was not successful at all. So you're right. That's exactly what I do. I ask them actually to download a specific app that I personally use, so I can personally attest that it actually works. But there are apps out there, and one of the great things about the apps is that you can just take a picture of the barcode, and it'll put down, what you've eaten throughout the day. So there's very easy ways to do it. And to your point, I also think that it's important for people to know that like losing weight is very difficult, but it's also a commitment, right? So you have to put the work into it. I always tell people like losing weight is a more serious commitment than being in a marriage, because it's like it's you have to commit to it, and you have to be able to commit to it long term. And it really starts with 90% the individual, and really 10% the mentor or the doctor. So to your point, yeah, I was not successful in the beginning, but with the free apps that are out there, actually it's helped a lot. So I do have a lot of my patients that keep track of what they're eating.
Good. I know that you're not going to, before we go, we do need to take a break, but before we do that, if you can throw out a few names, knowing that Dr. Avadhanula is not sponsored by or sponsoring any of these, but if anyone's interested in looking at these apps to start that process, what would you recommend?
Yeah, so I actually personally use LifeSum, and I really like it. So if that doesn't work for you, Calorie King is another one, but I like LifeSum. You can take pictures, and again, I'm not sponsored, but I can say that I personally use it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So we're going to just take a quick break, and then we'll come back and continue to talk about some other treatment options, medical and surgical. You're watching What's Up Doc on Muslim Network TV, and we'll be back after this short break.
A free online chat can give you the personalized tips you need to start boosting your retirement savings today.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
We are Justice for All. Headquartered in the heart of downtown Chicago, Justice for All is a global humanitarian initiative dedicated to raising awareness for human rights concerns impacting vulnerable minority groups. Our diverse team of staff and volunteers, led by Imam Malik Mujahid, work tirelessly to help Justice for All achieve their goals. We promote policies that protect religious freedom, address the root causes of mass displacement, and recognize the plight of refugees and forced migrants. Together, we can continue to stand up for justice. Justice for all.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. If you could see you through my eyes instead of your ego, I believe you'd be surprised to see that you've been blind. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. yeah, before you abuse, criticize and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Find out how to use an awkward silence to help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
Welcome back to What's Up, Doc. I'm your host, Dr. Aalia Al-Barwani, and today we are joined by Dr. Avadhanula, and we are talking about obesity and how we can help patients who have obesity and overweight. So before the break, Dr. Avadhanula, we were talking about many different things that can help our patients, including the importance of writing down and what individual is eating and intentional eating and how important that is. Something that I also try to educate my patients on is how to read food labels. I mentioned how there are all these gimmicky ads about foods that are not healthy. Like these, a great example are those 100-calorie snack packs. And usually they're like chocolate cookies made with high fructose corn syrup. And it kills me that they're trying to portray this as something that is healthy. So before we jump into medical and surgical options for treatment, I want a little bit of time to talk about the importance of looking at food labels and looking at when you are, which a lot of us are on the go, so we have to sometimes rely on packaged foods. What should we be looking at to avoid and to keep in mind when we are picking foods?
I think that's a great question and a great point, and it really goes into intentional eating. So not just knowing, not just like seeing what's in front of you with your food, but really what you're consuming and what you're putting in your mouth. So when, I ask my patients to look at food labels, I'm always asking them to look at the grams of carbs, the grams of total sugars that are in there, and also the grams of proteins. I do want to be clear to say that I'm not trying to promote, any particular diet, because as you know, there was a study that was done that compared all of these kind of popular diets, and all of the diets resulted in the exact same amount of weight loss. So I'm certainly not trying to promote, any particular like low carb diet or, keto or what have you. The best diet to stick with is the one that you are able to be compliant with. But certainly when you're looking at food labels, the first thing, honestly, is just to turn the package around and start reading the food labels. So even before knowing what you're reading is really just getting into the habit of looking at the ingredients in there, making sure that, like just as you said, if you don't recognize ingredients that are in there, it's probably not the best thing to eat. And the other thing you really want to look at is you really want to look at the total grams of sugars and look at the total grams of carbohydrates. You certainly, when you have a balanced diet, I always ask my patients to look at their plates, and we're not looking at an American plate. We're looking at correct, yeah, the solid plate. So the smaller plate, and we really do the plate method. So we're looking at half of your plate has to be green, and the other quarter is going to be protein, and the other quarter is going to be carbohydrates. So as long as you're kind of sticking within that and knowing what you're eating, reading what you're consuming, it should be a great start to your journey.
Perfect. I love that. Nice and simple. Hopefully simple enough. Okay, so let's talk about what are some, finally, right? When a patient comes into you after you've done all the evaluation and talked about lifestyle, etc., when we want to now talk about medication options, and then for our patients who are eligible for surgery, let's break that down a little bit. Let's start with medications. What are our options for medications? Because I'm sure you've seen, and patients come in asking you about caffeine supplements, or I forget the one that was really popular for a time now. This is some green fruit. I forget what it is, but these supplements that we see over the counter, patients are asking if that can be used for weight loss. And if, I'm sure and you'll share with us that hasn't been proven to be effective. And if they are, they've got some medication in there that shouldn't be in there. And so let's talk about that. What are some treatment options that you offer patients?
Yeah, I definitely want to preface the conversation by saying that there's no such thing as a magic pill. Definitely, if there was a magic pill, then obesity wouldn't be the $1 million problem. So I do want to preface the conversation by saying that. Now, on the flip side of that, there are some patients that may qualify for these anti-obesity medications or weight loss medications. And some of our medications really are quite effective in some of our patients. Patients that qualify are generally those that have a body mass index or a BMI of over 30 or 27 with associated comorbid conditions. So, for example, things like diabetes, just as an example, we start introducing the conversation of weight loss medications. There are a couple of options out there. There's some older weight loss medications that produce, somewhere around, 5% weight loss benefit, which is pretty good. But I do want to say that these weight loss medications should always, always be paired with diet and with exercise. And, I'll tell you why that is that, when you take a weight loss medication, part of it is that you're kind of speeding up your metabolism. So it's easier for you to lose weight. At some point, your body is at this certain, metabolic set point, and what we like to call it, your body will kind of plateau. And it will be difficult for you to go past that stubborn point. I think we all have experienced that, where the first 10, 20 pounds is kind of okay to get off, but then it's very difficult to get past that next 10, 20 points. And then you've kind of reached a plateau at that point. At that point, you can either go up on the dosing of the weight loss medication, but the other part of it is that you have to increase the amount of exercise that you're doing, because like we said before, it's that evolutionary tendency of conserving that energy. So you actually have to increase the amount of exercise that you're doing. But yeah, to answer your question, there are weight loss medications options out there. There was just recently weight loss medication that gained a lot of press that was originally manufactured or approved, for the purpose of diabetes. For the purpose of weight loss, it hasn't been approved yet by the FDA, but we're anticipating probably later on this year, that has almost a 15% weight loss. For benefit if you take that medication. So our medications are effective. They are for certain patients, because these are medications. So, every medication has a contraindication, and all medications have side effects. And so, I would really encourage, if you're interested in these things and you feel like you qualify, I would really encourage you to have that conversation with your provider to potentially explore these options.
That's a great point, because as you say, and I say all the time as well, with medications, there's going to be side effects, even with something as simple as Tylenol. And so it's really important for someone with a medical background to evaluate the whole bigger picture and see, well, what's going to maybe either help to improve another condition that you might have, just like you said, with a weight loss medicine that is approved currently for treatment of diabetes, but can help with weight loss. So if you're diabetic and you're trying to lose weight, that may be an option for you. But if you have, for example, a heart condition or a history of certain kinds of cancers, it may not be the best option for you. So of course, and this is a theme for this show, is that it's very individualized, right? We keep saying that it's very individualized. And so along that same line, another option, and for some people it's a last resort, which I don't believe that should be the attitude, because for some people this may be the starting point for them, and that is surgery, bariatric surgery or weight loss surgery. So let's, before we wrap up, just briefly talk about what that looks like and maybe some common options for patients who qualify and how they can qualify.
Yeah, so studies have shown that, bariatric surgery does result in a significant amount of sustained weight loss, and even diabetic remission in certain cases. So surgical options may be very good for a select population of patients. So we look at patients with a BMI of over 40, and patients with a BMI of 35 with associated comorbid conditions. So just as you correctly pointed out, so things like diabetes, things like obstructive sleep apnea, these are associated comorbid conditions. Surgical options can certainly be beneficial for a select few of patients. I will say that it's definitely important to have that conversation and have that consultation with a bariatric specialist, with your primary care provider, with your endocrinologist. And then also, the tail end of that is that it's really, really important to follow up with these specialty providers after you had the surgery, because I'm usually not concerned with my patients losing weight. I am always concerned with my patients sustaining the weight loss no matter what they do. So follow up in the long run is hugely important.
That's an excellent point and a great way to end this. I like to compare this to braces, okay? And the reason I do is because as someone who had braces, that part, okay, I won't say it was easy, but it was a lot easier than wearing my retainers every night. And as someone who has other members of the family who have gone through wearing braces and have not worn their retainers and now need to go back and look at getting braces again, it's that maintenance part that is so important, just like you said. So thank you so much for your time and your expertise. We really appreciate you sharing all of this with us today, Dr. Avadhanula, and we wish you every success in your future career.
Thank you so much. And I'm so happy to be here. Definitely just want to reiterate that for anybody that is struggling to lose weight, just know that it's hard. Keep up with the journey and seek help from your care team.
Excellent advice. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us in another episode of What's Up, Doc. You can watch all of our other episodes on our YouTube page and on our website at muslimnetwork.tv. I'm your host, Dr. Aalia Al-Barwani, and I'll see you next time on another episode of What's Up, Doc.